Good morning and happy Tuesday, December 17th. It's a good day to be alive. It is very cloudy here in the Bay Area today, but we're going to do what we can to overcome that and move right along. Today, I want to talk more about why I went dark for the last year, withdrawing from social media. I stopped podcasting. I stopped putting out a weekly newsletter. By the way, I'm going to bring that back next week, and you can subscribe to that. You can find that in the description if you're on Facebook or LinkedIn. I also stopped going after speaking gigs and opportunities to be guest on podcast. I stopped promoting my book. I just stopped all of it. And this week, I'm sharing with you why that happened. On yesterday's broadcast, I shared with you my struggles with the harsh inner critic, that voice in my head that was just constantly beating me up. And what I learned from looking at that harsh inner critic is that if I had asked that inner critic what purpose it served in my life, how it was helping me, it wouldn't have described itself as an inner critic. It would have described itself as an internal protector whose purpose was to shield me from perceived threats. Most often, those threats were part of my reality as a kid, but not necessarily a threat today. And yet that internal protector didn't get the memo, didn't get the update, and so it was still hypervigilant and still hyperactive. So without doing the work on that part of myself, without paying attention to that part of it, which meant embracing that this is just as much a part of me as anything else, I'm realizing that no amount of additional criticism of it would take it away, no amount of beating myself up about it would diminish it. Without doing the work on that part of myself, I'd sabotage myself. I ignored this harsh inner critical voice and it completely festered. It allowed my protector to paralyze me, which is not a great place to be. Stephanie says, I can relate. Me too, Stephanie. So I became so afraid of what might happen that I just became paralyzed in my own fear. And it was like my fear had developed a voice. And it was a voice that became so loud in my head that I just froze. I sabotaged my growth. I sabotaged my success. And doing the work meant acknowledging that part of me, not shoving that part of me down deeper and ignoring it and just hoping that it would go away, but acknowledging it and owning it as part of me. And the work that I'm doing now means that when I hear that harsh inner critic, I accept that this is me protecting me. And instead of giving those fears more attention and more fuel, I simply say, thank you. Thank you for protecting me. I understand the risk of what I'm doing. And even if that thing that I'm afraid of comes true, I can handle it. And that's the conversation that I have now when that harsh inner critic comes up. It's why I jump on here in the morning and one of the first things that I do is do this because I don't have all day to think about it. I don't have all day to think about how my face looks, how my voice sounds, what I'm going to say. I just get on here and do it. And the reason that I do that is because I'm taking baby steps of just accepting that this is just part of my process. Just accepting that that inner critic exists. Thank you for trying to protect me. Now I'm going to move along. So I know now that if somebody makes fun of how I talk, I can handle it. It's okay. If somebody makes fun of what I'm saying, I can handle it. If somebody comments about my jagged teeth, I can handle it. If somebody disagrees with me or thinks about something differently and they want to vocalize that, I can handle it. I'm integrating and acknowledging that the protector in me exists instead of shoving it into a corner and ignoring it, because ignoring it only makes that voice get louder. It became so loud for me that it became absolutely deafening and paralyzing. So today I want to talk about another reason that I went dark. And I would say that I would sum that up as saying that the reason that it happened was because I had career confusion, just simple career confusion. And I want to break this down a little bit. I'm somebody, I've been working on this for a long time, but I'm somebody who's pretty literal. Things are either this way or that way. Things are black or white. They are right or wrong. There's not a lot of gray area in my thinking. I'm working on it. It's something I've been working on for a long time. But it's part of me. I have a hard time in the gray areas, all right? My first business was a marketing firm. I owned the marketing firm inside of the world's largest real estate office at the time, and I was serving close to 1,000 agents, which, by the way, not a bad first business to own. I was young, I was dumb, I had no idea how fortunate I was to have that opportunity, and I was really not business savvy at all. I sort of lucked into that situation, not knowing a whole lot about business. How unsavvy I was, I'm going to save that story for another day. But out of that experience came the opportunity to create a training business in the real estate industry. And I wrote a training program that teaches agents how to launch their career. And it's a really, really good program. The agents that go through it see really good results. And for some reason, I have no idea why, but I'm really good with new agents. I just get them, they get me, and I have great relationships with new agents. I don't know where that came from. It just is. So those businesses, that marketing firm and that training business, those really took off. And I got to expand from that really big office in Austin to working with offices around the world. And there were agents around the world that were going through my program. And I got to a place where things were really humming along for me. Things were really going. But after a while of things firing on all cylinders, I had hired a big staff. I had really spread myself thin. I spent a lot of time on airplanes. Guess what happened? I got really burned out. I got so burned out, like I was extra crispy, burnt out. I was really not loving life. Then, March 11th, 2020. March 11th, 2020. I was teaching a workshop in Austin for real estate people, and we were being hosted, my workshop was being hosted by a local title company, and they had me in a training room with glass. There was a lot of glass, so you could see outside what was going on. And in the title company, they in this particular office, they had a lot of TVs on the walls. And so I'm teaching this workshop, and I can see through the glass walls on the TV breaking news. So I looking at this, what is this? Well, we are officially in a pandemic. Within minutes of that news breaking, the agents in my workshop, they are no longer paying attention to anything that I have to say. They're paying attention to their phones because their phones are ringing and buzzing nonstop. No kidding, I have to stop my workshop and let them take the calls. It was a surreal moment. I will never forget that day. People are calling and texting because they're killing their deals. They're canceling their real estate deals. Deals were falling off. Everybody was canceling their deal. Fear and uncertainty had spread faster than COVID. So this happens. Then not many days later, all the real estate offices that had subscribed to my training program, those real estate offices make their money from the agents selling real estate. Well, guess what happens? They're all canceling their memberships with me. Now, as I mentioned, I was already extra crispy. I was completely burnt out in the real estate industry. I was exhausted. And as bad as it was, as much as I hated getting those cancellation phone calls and emails, if I'm being really honest, I was a little bit relieved. Because I'm thinking, here's my out. Here's my opportunity to just be done with this. I didn't have to do it. The universe did it for me. So at this time, I also knew that I really wanted to write a personal development book. And professionally, I wanted to move into the personal development space, which I did. So on June 1st, 2021, I released Break and Untangle, which was my first personal development book, and it was my second book. The first one was a marketing book that nobody wants to read, but this was my second book and it was my first foray into the personal development space. In retrospect, the way I handled that transition was less than ideal. I did not handle well going from the real estate space and growing a very successful business there, moving into writing and speaking and doing, corporate speaking gigs. I did not handle that transition very well. In fact, I handled it really badly. And there are three main ideas that I want to share with you today that I learned through that experience. The first is, if you're an entrepreneur, get help. I did not grow up in an environment where I was surrounded by entrepreneurs. I grew up in an environment where everybody got a paycheck every 2 weeks. That's how you made your money. Every 2 weeks, a check, they still got physical checks, right? They picked up their check, they went to the bank, they put it in the bank, and that's how, my family paid their bills. And there's nothing wrong with that. Or if my grandparents, they were getting their Social Security checks. Like, that's just how it happened. So that's what I grew up in. That's what I saw. The way of life for an entrepreneur is very, very different than somebody who makes their living in a more traditional way. Over the years, I've had several business coaches, and I usually bring them in when I'm working on something where I am pushing beyond what I know, and I lean on them to help me navigate and think through new terrain, new ways of doing things, new opportunities. Not bringing in a coach to help me navigate a transition, going from real estate to the training business to writing and coaching and personal development, was a giant mistake. Transitions, as I talked about a few days ago, it's 25 years, about 25 years of our life are going to be spent in transitions. Getting good at transitions is important, or at least understanding what's happening when you're in a transition is really important if you want to be happy and successful. And not getting help during a transition, major, major mistake. If you're somebody that's thinking about or currently experiencing a transition, get help. Get someone that can help you navigate that terrain because it's tough. It's really tough. The second big lesson I learned through this, and I think a coach would have told me this had I gotten help, was when a business is working, my business was working, don't stop. Don't shut down a business that's already working. Instead of stopping or shutting it down, find another way to make that business work. Find a new way to make that work, and finding a new way to make that work is going to have to be discovered outside of you. You've already done everything you know to do. I don't think that people get into burnout situations because they've wanted to get there, or they haven't tried to figure out how to not be burnt out in their business. So you've exhausted at this point. If you're feeling burnout, you've exhausted all the ways that you have to think about your current situation. Bring in help. Get someone to help you think about a new way to approach that business, and help yourself not feel as crispy as you're currently feeling if that's where you are. Get help. March 11th, 2020 was a terrible day for business. But remember what happened in real estate during the pandemic? It went absolutely gangbusters. People made fortunes during the pandemic through real estate because prices shot up. People were paying insane amounts of money. Markets we're seeing, like in Austin right now, we're seeing this correction. People made fortunes. And because I shut down the business, because I wasn't thinking properly about a transition, I'm completely missed out on that wave of opportunity. So don't shut down a business that's already working. Get help figuring that out so that you can not feel crispy, you can get the help that you need, and you can keep something that's already working, bringing income and revenue to you. The third lesson that I learned goes back to this idea that I have that everything is black and white. I thought that I had to choose between being somebody who owned a business in the real estate space and being somebody who writes books about personal development. I thought that I had to choose. I lived in a worldview that said you are either this or that, not both. Why not both? If you're an entrepreneur who isn't just the business owner, but also the business operator, and there's a big distinction there. There's a big distinction between being the business owner, somebody who owns the business, and the business operator, somebody who's running and actively involved in the business. Yes, running more than one track at one time could prove to be very, very challenging. But if you've got a mindset of being the owner and not the operator, or at least not the primary operator, then you can run multiple tracks. So for me, this has meant relaunching the real estate training and coaching business. And that's my big word these days. And instead of but, and I'll keep writing my books. I'll keep doing the speaking gigs around those. And I'm going to get the real estate training and coaching business back up and running, which I'm actively doing. The days of graduating college, you get a job and you retire from that job after 30 years, that dream died 2 generations ago. That rendition of the American dream is long gone dead. With the emergence of AI, and if you've not just taken a little bit of time to look and see what AI is doing and what they're going to be able to do with that, and what the next 3 years are going to be insane, go spend 10 minutes a day just checking out what AI is doing. Entrepreneurs are going to have to be so much more flexible and so much more agile in their thinking. We are going to have to be much more adaptable to a rapidly changing landscape. Pasha and I were talking about this the other day, and we were having a hard time coming up with industries that are not going to be significantly impacted by AI. I think the best one we came up with was plumbing, because people are always going to go to the bathroom and need a place to put that. And I don't know how AI fixes that. That was about the only one that we were coming up with. I'm sure that there are others, but just the fact that it's taking a long, hard time for us to think about where AI is not going to impact us tells you about where we're going. What we're making money on today could be replaced by AI tomorrow. And so that means guys like me, entrepreneurs like you, who have traditionally seen ourselves and our businesses as this or that, we are under a threat of extinction if we can't become more agile. If we can't adjust our black and white thinking, and Stephanie is saying here, I grew up very much in black and white, and it doesn't take time to, and it does take time to see the nuance in things, and I'm working on it. Me too, Stephanie. This means that we have to become much more agile in our thinking. This means running multiple tracks. This means instead of saying this or that, we say this and that. So why did I go dark for the last year? Because I didn't ask for the help I really needed to maneuver a career change. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to get help through the transitions. It's so important to get help through the transitions. The second thing, I stopped a business that was already working, and I really shouldn't have. I really should have thought about how else I could make this work. I should have thought about bringing in someone else that could help me and potentially replace me in that business. And I know that that's really scary for some of us that own a business and have been operators in that business, the idea of replacing ourselves. And I was talking to a business owner the other day that told me nobody can do what I do. Nobody can replace me. That's probably not true. It may mean that you're not making any money, or that you're breaking even, or maybe even paying a little bit to keep that business going for a minute, but it's very likely that you can find somebody to replace you in your business if you've got help setting that kind of thing up. And the third thing was I couldn't see myself being multiple things at once. I just didn't have that vision of myself. I was working out of memory and not out of imagination. Work from imagination. I couldn't see myself being multiple things at once. I was limiting myself. I was limiting my potential. I was limiting my capabilities. When I should have been thinking about expanding myself, I was thinking about putting myself in another box. Don't think about putting yourself in another box. If you're thinking about a transition, if you're thinking about doing something new, don't think about fitting yourself into another box. Think about, how am I going to expand myself, expand my life, expand my vision so that I can include other things, not limit myself once again. It's a big, big mistake that I made, and I'm learning from it. I cannot emphasize enough. Get help. Every phase of my personal and professional development, as I look back on it, the constant thing that I would change with everything that I've gone through, the thing that I think about more than anything else is, why did you not get help when you needed it the most? Why didn't you get help at the right time? Why didn't you get help before you went out and made an absolute mess out of it? Why didn't you get a little bit of help before creating a situation that was much more difficult to dig your way out of? Get help. If you have a vision and you're not sure how to bring it into reality, and you're a little bit ashamed of that, I have certainly been ashamed of that, where I've got a vision, I've got an idea, but I don't exactly know how, and then I'll spend time beating myself up about, well, you should know how to do it. If it's your idea, you should know how to do it. That's not true. That's not reality. There are visionaries, and then there are integrators, and those are two very distinct, different ideas. There are people who have good ideas and can see and predict the future, and there are people who are really good at taking those ideas and doing the nuts and bolts of actually making them happen. And those are two very, very different skill sets. You shouldn't be ashamed if you're one or the other. Both are critical to moving us all forward. There are leaders and there are managers, right? These are not the same. These are not the same thing. Get help, get help, get help. Your dream, your vision, your future is worth it. So until I see you next time, may you have joy, peace, and happiness, good health and well-being, a life of ease and prosperity, the courage to get what you want out of this life, the clarity to know what that is, the imagination to not sell yourself short, and the discipline to see it through. Have a great Tuesday, everybody.